What's up, everyone, and welcome to the OUTcast Podcast Year-End Review. My name is Leo, and my pronouns are he, him.
My name is Luke, my pronouns are he, him.
My name is Rose, and my pronouns are she, her.
My name is Hunter, and my pronouns are she, her.
For many of us, 2021 was a turbulent year filled with lots of highs and lows. It left us wondering what kind of craziness will be in store for us in 2022. I mean, the year opened up with a bang, and I don't mean in a good way. With seemingly no time for us to breathe, we were witnessing an insurrection at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, and it felt like things did not slow down from there. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were inaugurated. There were mass shootings in Atlanta and Boulder, Colorado. Derek Chauvin was found guilty of George Floyd's murder. Kyle Rittenhouse was acquitted of all charges. The number of LGBTQ officials throughout the United States reached nearly 1,000 as of July 21st, 2021. And to top it all off, we saw the rise of the new variant Omicron during this already difficult pandemic. However, despite all of this, Outreach decided to start a podcast that would give our queer youth a platform to voice our opinions, frustrations, and passions. It was on January 30th, 2021, when we uploaded our first episode and the OUTcast Podcast was officially born. So for today's episode, we want to take this time to reflect on our first year podcasting. So we're going to go through and ask all of the individual hosts a series of questions, and I'm going to list them now so you know what they are. Number 1, how did you first get started with the OUTcast Podcast? Number 2, how did you feel on the day of your first recording? What thoughts were going through your head? Were you nervous? Are there some mistakes you made that only you know and no one else caught? Number 3, how did you feel after you finished your first episode? Number 4, what were your thoughts and feelings when you first heard your voice on an episode? Number 5, what skills do you feel you learned or improved by participating in the podcast? And lastly, we're all going to pick an episode that was our personal favorite and tell us why you liked it in particular. I'll go first. So how did I first get started with OUTcast Podcast? Honestly, I don't remember. I'm not that good at remembering. I feel like I talked to it. A lot of my friends were in it at the time, and I am a very opinionated person who's very passionate, especially about queer politics and queer culture. And I was like, hell yeah, someone wants to hear my opinions, or if they don't, they're gonna. So I was eager to join. And then how did I feel on the day of my first recording? I'll admit I was stressed out. I tend to motor mouth a lot when I get anxious or I'm kind of put on the spot. And so I think I was worried that I was just going to start going off. And I did. I almost guarantee if I listen back to it, I will hear things that were probably not in the script or I wasn't intending to say because I just kind of panicked and thought it would be funny. So I don't know if that's a mistake per se, but I know I was definitely a lot more inappropriate than I wanted to be on the jokes on some of the episodes because that's my default branch of humor when I start to get worried. And how did I feel after I finished my first episode? Well, it was the anti-Semitism one. And so it's definitely a hard start, but I think it was very important. And I felt like, you know what? I've done something serious for once. I've talked about politics and I've done something worth listening to. I was very proud of it. What were my thoughts and feelings when I first heard my voice on an episode? Cringe and suffer. At the time, I might have been pre-testosterone. I've currently been taking for a few months. And so listening to my voice has never been a pleasant experience, but especially I think if I were to listen to my voice from the first episode compared to now, it would be drastically different in some ways, but I really like it. I think it's a kind of a memoriam of progress in its own way, and I'm glad that it exists. And what skills do I feel I learned and improved by participating in the podcast? I think that I learned a lot about public speaking just in terms of how to make yourself heard in an eloquent way. It teaches you a bit of improv because, especially with interviews, you don't know exactly, there's not a clear script, you're just kind of trying to work with it. And it taught me a lot about like how to convey information and how to just work a podcast. I think it's a very good experience, and I think it's would be helpful for like personal growth as well as learning intellectual skills. So next we are going to Luke.
What's up? I've been here since the very beginning. So my first episode was like the original pilot episode where we kind of went over what all exactly we were going to do. I was introduced to the idea by Jordan Murphy, who is the person who came up with the idea. And I'm very proud of them. They've come a long way. They've put the entire thing together, and it's really quite awesome to see like how far their idea has come. First day of recording though, I was super nervous. Like I had never like done anything like this before. I mean, I had been in theater previously, so I was kind of used to talking in front of audiences. However, this was like something a little bit different since I was going to, be showing my beliefs rather than something that somebody had written out for me. And I had always been like super strong about like what I believed in and how I showed that. So it was kind of a whole other challenge to, instead of talking about it to just like people that you were close with, you're presenting your opinion to like the general public. So when I first started working on the actual podcast and like figuring out what all I needed to say, I would like rehearse my points coming up, like as they were coming up. Like I was like constantly looking back and forth to see when it was my time to start, so I didn't start too late or too early. So that was going through my head a lot. I was incredibly nervous, but it's a lot less nerve-wracking now, just because I'm used to speaking in front of a smaller group of people and then a larger group of people in that order. So after the first episode, I was honestly like a little embarrassed because the first time we recorded it, it just didn't go the way we wanted it to. And so I was like, wow, I could have really done a whole lot better. Like I don't think I was researched enough on it, all of that. So I was really embarrassed about myself. But then things started to get better and I slowly grew more confident. I definitely stuttered a lot during my first episode. I definitely wasn't myself because of all of the anxiety that was coming from speaking in front of a lot of people. But I do feel like I learned how to like come out of my shell, just kind of talk like, I would normally talk in a setting if I was just sitting at a table with a group of friends, which I mean, I kind of am, which is really nice. So I definitely feel like I improved on articulating myself a bit better and being able to get a point across. So that's what I got from this past year. What about you, Hunter?
I got started a little bit late because so I was asked to be a guest on the Lil Nas X episode. And at first, I didn't think I was going to be on the podcast. I was just oh, okay, I'll just be a guest on this episode. And then we had finished it and then I was asked to join the cast and I was like, yeah. And so I unexpectedly joined the podcast, I would say, but it was a pleasant surprise. For me, it's always weird hearing my voice. And I don't know if that's a trans dysphoric kind of thing or if it's just a hearing your own voice thing, but I don't know, hearing my own voice has always been weird. Not bad per se, but just kind of, I don't know, there's a certain uncanniness to it, I guess. I don't know. It's more so when I'm hearing myself speaking than it is anything else. But I guess it's just because it feels more real. I don't know if that makes sense or not. But as far as what I was thinking though, it's kind of just am I going to say the right things? Am I going to get across the points that I want to get across? Am I smart enough to be in this space? Am I gonna fit in space? Those are the thoughts that usually I feel go through most people's heads. No, definitely my initial thoughts coming into this space, obviously. And so I would say I was very nervous because for me, I'm a theater actress and I'm used to doing that. But for me, public speaking where I am myself is I'm very nervous about that. Like when I have to just like be myself and like present that to people, like that's very nerve-wracking to me. I don't know why. I think it's just because like I can hide behind a character, but I can't really like hide behind myself. So it's like, yeah, it makes me very nervous. And then also like when I was joining in a time where I was still like trying to figure out like what my gender identity was, and I was still getting comfortable with like saying like, hey, these are my pronouns and like such and such and such, because like I was still getting comfortable with like being able to like say like these are my pronouns. So like I feel like that also added to the nervousness as well, because it was still very much like a process for me. Mistakes, I would say probably, so I think for me it's more so for me I kind of tend to wing it a lot. So I would say like that's kind of something that like I would say like for this season that I would work more on, is like being a bit more structured with the way I approach episodes, because usually I'm kind of just like, I'm just gonna tackle it, I'm just gonna jump into it, and like that's fine to an extent, but I feel like I need to have more structure when it comes to like my involvement in like, you know, future episodes, especially because like we're usually talking about very important topics and we always want to come with the facts first, you know. So that's very important. I would say I felt good after finishing the first episode, because I mean I finished the first episode and like then you guys asked me to join, so like that made me feel like validated, I guess, that it was like, oh, like these people want to like these people want to hear my opinions all the time. Like that's very validating, you know, like they want to let me in their space. Like that's very validating. They're obviously very like intelligent people, and like they think that I'm like good enough to be in their space. Like that's, you know, there's definitely validating sort of element to that. And so like my thoughts when I heard my voice in my first episode, I feel like I don't know, it's like I'm a different person than from when I did that first episode. I remember I had FaceTimed one of my like girlfriends, and I hadn't FaceTimed her in a while. I think the last time I FaceTimed her was like around that time. And she was just saying like, you look so different because like you're carrying yourself differently. And I feel like in that time, like I can kind of hear like I can kind of hear that I was in a different place. Like I wasn't as confident in myself, and I wasn't as confident in my identity, like as a trans feminine person. And I feel like now I have a certain confidence that I just didn't used to have. And I think that's just come with being around other queer people and other trans people, and like sort of learning that like I'm not as alone as I think I am. Because I think so often, because I'm a very like straight trans woman, I'm often in a lot of straight spaces and around a lot of like cis people quite a bit. Like that's just kind of how my life is, unfortunately. So it's like I often feel very invisible and like alone, especially like with going out and stuff and being in very like straight, like heterosexual cis sort of spaces. It's like, you know, I have times where I sort of blend in, but then it's like people figure out that I'm trans, and that's where the sort of like not the invisibility, like the isolatedness comes in, because they kind of like sort of like shift away so it's like coming to this space has made it to where I am at this place where I am now, where I feel a bit more confident. I would say skills, back to Leo's point on like improv, I would definitely say, because it definitely taught me how to think on my feet a lot more and trust myself, because I think especially with me being an actor, like I have to trust myself and and trust that I know like what to do. And so as I've been going through the process of like Newsies and stuff like that, I kind of have that now of like being able to trust myself. So I would say that's definitely a skill, like more improv, because I used to be very uncomfortable with improv and like thinking on my feet. I always needed like a script and clear directions. And with this is like you kind of just I don't know, you just go with it. I don't know. There's structure to it, but there's a lot of just like going with the flow with it. So I would say that's definitely like the most important skill that I would say I've sort of learned from it.
With my experience with the podcast, when it comes to getting started with it, I was one of the original podcast people. I was in the same situation as Luke, where Jordan, my friend, came up to me and was just like, I want to do a podcast and talk about like LGBT topics and other kind of stuff. Like, what do you think about that? It was just like, I was very unsure about it because I've never really been super into podcasts. I don't listen to them regularly. I'm just like not really into them in general. Even now doing one, I don't listen to podcasts, not really. But my friend needed people to do it, and I was just like, you know what, why not? I get to try something new. If I don't like it, I can always just say, hey, I tried it, not really up for it. It was just, why not? And so, I got started doing it. When it came to the day of my first recording, I was, obviously anxious because it was just like, oh God, what if I like interrupt people? Because like, even though it's a casual conversation between friends, I don't like interrupting people. And, so getting used to that and just going off and stuff, that took a little bit of work. And also working on like trying to avoid stuttering or like the long pauses where it's just like, I don't know what to say. When it comes to mistakes, I don't remember, and I'm too lazy to go back and check. So, if there are mistakes, there are mistakes. We did it. It turned out all right. I can move on and be fine. When it came to how I felt after I finished it, it was a mixed bag for me when I started because the episodes themselves weren't bad. And after we finished them, I was like, this isn't too bad. Okay. But like the first couple of episodes leading up to the actual recording, I always got so stressed and just like hated it because it was like, I had like this anxiety, like I have issues with people pleasing and I know it, but so like having to like build up my like research and make sure that I'm contributing enough to the conversation, that just felt like a lot at first. So I was just like it was just really hard, but you get used to it and it's just sticking to it and realizing at the same time like that I don't have to push myself too much. I've grown to really enjoy it as I've been doing it. Is it like the most amazing thing in the world? No. It's a podcast between friends, but it doesn't have to be super crazy amazing. We're just doing our best, and that's good. It's good enough. So, thoughts and feelings when I first heard my voice. That's me. I don't know. Sometimes I get like, I know that my voice is like not necessarily high, but it's also not really low. It's like this weird kind of middle ground and sometimes nasally. So it's like hearing it on a recording, it's just like, like that's me. It's a little awkward to hear my voice, but like that's me. Whatever. I don't know. It's not really that big of a deal to me. Hearing myself recorded singing though, don't like that. Never like that. But talking, okay, whatever. Just yeah, let's just chill. When it came to skills, I don't know if I necessarily learned any new skills. I think I just got to practice and build upon ones I've already like started on, like being able to work together with a group to put something together. You do that all the time in your general life and in school. Public speaking. When I was younger, I had issues with speaking up to myself or speaking up for myself and just like saying what I thought, because just like childhood trauma issues and shit, all that jazz. But I've like, worked on building up my voice as I've gone along. So like, I already started developing those skills before the podcast. I just got to continue to utilize them and build upon them in it. I get interviews. I have yet to actually like apply for a job or anything. I've done like a couple informational interviews, but this has been really good to help, I feel, with my nerves when it comes to interviews, because yes, there are expectations of them, but it's really just asking each other questions or asking the person questions or whatever, and then just doing your best. So that's nice. I don't know. It's there have been some moments where it's like hard, or I accidentally, like, when we first started, there were multiple times where I messed up with forgetting that we had meetings, and then I'd like be doing things with family, and then the meeting would come up and I'd be like, oh god, no! That sucks. But I got better at it, and I started schedules. They're important. Use them. That's a tip just in general. You don't, even outside of a podcast. But also, another thing that's really cool about the podcast is, like, as we've gone along, we've gotten more and more people involved. So there's very much this energy of, like, do what you can, but when there are moments where you just can't, it's okay. There'll be people who will back you up. And it's like, even if you're struggling with, like, coming to meetings or stuff like that, people care less about you coming to the meetings and stuff, and more about how are you doing? Are you doing okay? So that kind of social experience has been really nice. Also, for me, I struggle sometimes, even at college. Like, I expected going to college it would be a lot easier to make friends and meet people. That's not the case for me, unfortunately. Not yet. Not yet. Give myself wiggle room there. So this has been a good way to help keep some social stuff going on in my life, and also a good way to stay connected to home when I'm, like, not there.
Give yourself some credit that this is a pandemic. Like, I spent my first year of college not in a dorm and without any access to really people. I had all online classes, and so it's like I didn't meet another person on college campus for like my first semester until afterwards. So it's not even so much that you're like, there is a level that it's just hard to make friends in college, but it is harder now than maybe typically.
Yeah. My first year of college, I had a friend from my first semester, but then she ended up staying home the second semester, and then I just didn't have anyone to hang out with. But at the same time, my room was like a double, and it was slightly bigger than other double rooms in my dorm, so I didn't mind having that space to myself for the whole year.
Living in luxury, whereas I'm still staying with my parents.
At least, listen, one of the things I hate about college, this is very off topic, but I don't care. Like, some places will have like a communal kind of like area with a kitchen that you can use. None of the places I've stayed at have that. And it's like, technically my floor that I'm staying on this year does have an area like that, but it's been co-opted by like my living learning center that I'm a part of. So it's like a cafe that's open like at the end of the week. So it's like I don't have access to a kitchen. I'd much rather be stuck at home and have a kitchen than be stuck in a dorm without one. But, you know, I can still manage a dorm. It's not bad. Anyway.
Totally fair. So for this next part, we are going to be talking to each other. It's not going to be as much of just going around the circle. However, I am going to say I want to do this in reverse order. So whoever went last this time goes first this time, and vice versa. And no, I am not stalling. So we are going to
sure
be
sounds
talking
like you are.
Yeah,
a little
sounds
bit.
Like you already stalled for 30 minutes, but you know, go off.
I'm lightly stalling. But for context, I was late to the meeting by 30 minutes. No one will ever live it down.
No.
But what we're going to be talking about now is what is our favorite episode of the year, and just kind of why we liked it, why it matters to us. This can be for serious or funny reasons. So the first person, that would be Rose. What's your favorite episode?
Okay, see, I'm going to preface this with I have issues, okay? So I've not listened to all of the episodes. It's hard sometimes to get started and do things. So mainly I'm just going through the ones that, not going through them, but like picking from the ones that I've been a part of or have like been more aware of. So of my experience with the podcast up to this point, my favorites have probably been the episode we did on anti-Semitism, despite how sad and just like rough that one was, and the Lil Nas X episode. when it comes to the anti-Semitism one, I just like, that topic is a rough one, and it can be really, really upsetting, but it's something that I feel is really, really important and not always talked about. And so going through that episode and trying to, give education to people who might not have been aware of it was really important to me. And I felt like we did a decent job of doing that, because that issue is upsettingly prevalent, but it's like one of those issues that's, you see it a lot of times by people who just aren't aware of it. And I get that that's like a whole thing. Like when there's systems of oppression in place, it's purposely made so that it's not easy to recognize it happening, because it's a lot easier then to sweep it under the rug and to justify the more overt stuff that's going on. But it's just like so many people just spread anti-Semitism just because they just don't know better and don't have the avenues, or at least don't necessarily look for the avenues to learn more about it, and it makes me stresses me out. So I wanted to talk about it. And the Lil Nas X episode was just like, it's Lil Nas X. Icon. Adore that man. It's just like, the song was a banger. The music video just was like so rife with like symbolism, and was so just like, this is who I am. If you don't like it, I don't fucking care. And just like, it was great in and of itself as like a cultural like moment, but just like the aftermath of it, the positive side and the negative side, and talking about it and about the different responses to him and what he had done was just like really cool to talk about. Also just seeing how there are like the intersections between racism, homophobia, and all that stuff. I feel like, I mean, we've talked about it multiple times in this podcast, is that oppression is very intersectional. And so talking about it was just like, it felt like a really productive conversation. And we had a good balance of people talking about it. Hunter gave really, really good, anecdotes about like their personal experiences and how they saw the issue. And it was just like, it was such a cool episode. And I'm not going to lie, I really enjoyed hosting that episode. And I felt like I did a really good job of doing that. So like that, I really liked that. I like doing a good job.
I think both of those are really good episodes for the reasons that you mentioned. I think the anti-Semitism one is something super prevalent today and is very relevant, I would say. And I also think it's kind of important, and this kind of comes up with the Lil Nas episode and a couple of the other episodes you've done, but this idea of intersectionality, that anti-Semitism is a queer issue in the same way that racism is a queer issue. It is something that is important to us because it is important to people in our community, and it's important for the sake of humanity in general, at large. So I think that just kind of, not only is it an important subject, but I think it's an important one for us in particular to cover, because it's good to make our stance clear. I guess I'll put it that way. And just come out the gate with that. And I do think that it is one of our most popular episodes, and I think that that's good because that means that information is getting out there and people want to learn and do care about that stuff. And I think that, honestly, I would like to do more political episodes or more episodes about more serious issues. On the other hand, I did like the Lil Nas X one a lot because of just the ways that we both managed to weave in the humor of it, but also personal anecdotes, but also larger social trends that we were noticing. And in terms of, you mentioned the reaction and the video itself, it was both of which are just very cool. And I'm glad that you brought them up.
Also, for the future, I do want to focus a lot on intersectionality because I know there are a lot of issues and laws that are being passed locally and federally that would prevent schools from talking about it. So I think it is really important that smaller sources like us get that information out there any way that we can. My favorite episode was personally the James Fenn episode. I absolutely loved talking to that man. I got so much cool information from him. It just felt like I was talking to somebody who genuinely cared for the younger generation rather than somebody who was like, oh, those Gen Zers and their oversensitivity and all that. They don't know what they're talking about. And he knew what we were talking about, which is so important for younger queer folk to hear. that we are doing the right thing, that we are, not doing something new. We are continuing on from what people in the past have done. And I thought that was super important, that episode. Not only was it incredibly fun to like just talk to like an older gay person just because there are so few of them, but also it made me like, it solidified in my mind that I am indeed doing the right thing as an activist, and we are all indeed doing the right thing as activists. And
it was extremely validating.
It was very validating. And he was also just super easy and fun to talk to.
Yeah, he was a riot. It was so wonderful to hear him go off, and it's just like sort of playing on the whole, having an older person like saying, "Oh yeah, you guys are doing the right thing," like talking about like classism and stuff. It was just like, well, there was more than just that, obviously, but we talked about so many different like political topics and about intersectionality with him, and he just got it, and it was just like so refreshing to just talk about a thing without having to clarify any of it, really. It's like that can be really rare sometimes in conversations.
Yeah, it was nice to not have to define every other thing to somebody when you're having a conversation with them. It's also good to know that there are people out there who have just done this in the past, who are, know what we're doing and help, he gave us some great advice. And, it was just a really great episode. I was very proud of that episode. I was also very proud of the anti-Semitism episode as well. That was, I think, one of the only episodes I posted. But as the only Jewish member in our cast, I thought it was really important for me to do, since it was popping up so much. Obviously, it wasn't my favorite because I just don't like talking about it too much. It's something I really just have the duty to talk about. But I do think it was very important to get that information out there any way that I could.
And we do appreciate you talking about that, because we know that it is difficult, and it sucks to have to be the only Jewish person in the room, constantly put on the spot, having to explain, like, no, this is bad, dummies. But we do appreciate you being willing to do that and explain some stuff that maybe we wouldn't even think about. Or I think that it definitely wouldn't have been the same if just we were covering it from our hypothetical experiences or things we had read. And I also do think that I really appreciated the James Finn episode, because just like the historical perspective was really nice. Like, that's something I would like to cover more in the future as well, like queer history and what that was kind of like. And so it was really good to be able to talk to someone who knows, who was there, who saw some of that on the firsthand. And it's again, kind of like you mentioned, inspiring in the sense of getting that validation and knowing that like this is someone who cares and has always cared, and this is real. It wasn't just some person in a history book. These are real people who existed and still exist and cared. I don't know, it was just very powerful, I guess.
No, yeah. I was literally just thinking that same thing earlier. It was so nice because a lot of like LGBT history is just buried or forgotten, or just really just not. And I think it sucks also just because like a big reason for that is because of the AIDS epidemic. There just like aren't as many people to tell that history. Man, that's fucking upsetting. Anyway, but it's just like, hearing him not only talk about his own experiences, but to also sort of put into light other people's experiences that, he not, I don't want to say experienced because I just said that like 2 or 3 times, but like he mentioned people of color, especially like poor like woman in the hospital with HIV and AIDS and stuff, who's like, I can just imagine like their stories just not being out there, just not being known. So it was cool to hear that as well. I mean, like, not cool, obviously. It was, like, really depressing and upsetting to hear that. But it's something that, like, I want to hear because I don't want that to get buried or forgotten.
Exactly. And honestly, the saddest thing about that entire episode is that James Finn, I think, is the oldest gay person that I've ever met. And he's not even that old. So I think going off of that is why this episode is so important to me, so that all of that stuff isn't literally buried.
That was a very good quote. Just literally buried. I was just like, oh, hit me for a second. Hunter, your turn to follow that up.
So, I'm trying to think, because like initially, like my answer for like my favorite episode was either the queer representation episode that I did with Leo and River. Like I would say like that's my favorite. But then also I remember saying that the Little Nas X episode was also my favorite. So I like the Little Nas X one because I just remember like Leo just cracking me up that entire time. So that one was just like fun. Like I think that's why it's my favorite episode, because like there was a sort of ease to it. Like I just got on and it just sort of flowed. And I'm sure y'all planned in advance, but like I was just coming into it and I don't know, it just felt very easy. I don't know, it just felt like a nice conversation, I feel like. And so it was a very fun sort of experience the episode was. But
I will say they did not plan in advance for me to talk about having sex with the devil as much as I definitely did. I still remember telling my dad, I'm in a podcast. Watch the anti-Semitism one and skip the other one I'm in. Just don't watch it. Just like let's just not give grandma the link to this one, okay?
No, I loved it though, honestly. But I would say like the queer representation episode with Leo and River was definitely like top for me, because like I don't know, like just getting to talk about those tropes but with like trans masculine people specifically. So like hearing a perspective that I don't have but that mirrors mine in some way is like interesting and also validating. And it was just like and like film and like TV and like just pop culture and like stories is like that's what I want to do with my life. So it was very interesting to like and fun for me to sort of tackle how like the place that people like me have like occupied with other trans people, especially because I think that's important. Like as I'm entering this as a trans, like a Black trans woman, to like examine like how have trans women been and trans people in general been represented within this industry, because that's the only way that we can like really fix that for any of the trans people who are trying to enter the industry after, is by examining what has come before and like how can we do better. So that was very important for me, especially as a trans actress who is like sort of like still making like my way in the industry. And it was also just very interesting because it's just like it's my niche interest and I just get to talk about it. Like who doesn't love that? You just get to talk about your niche interest for the next hour. It's lovely.
I honestly feel like almost the exact same way. I'm obsessed with film and film history, like cultural impacts of film. So when you and me and River were all just going off on like the history of tropes and why they exist and all of the different, like I could have done that episode for like 5 hours, but we were like, let's reel it back in.
On and on and on. It's bad. It's really bad. Like most of the YouTube content I watch is just stuff about film. Like I really like I will really sit and watch like a whole YouTube video just about like a best actress win, like in the history of it. And like I'm just like, wow, this is so interesting. Like that's why I never watch YouTube with other people, because they're like, this is what you watch. So yeah,
video essays absolutely insufferable. I'll sit down and be like I'll watch a YouTube video for an hour and come out to my dad and be like, hey, did you know about the anti-fascist propaganda in Starship Troopers? Isn't that fascinating? You want to talk about it for an hour? Because I just did.
My favorite thing to do is like someone will tell me they're watching a movie and I'll be like, who is in it? And they'll look at me like, Hunter, I don't know. Like, what? I'm like, who's in it? I'm like, I'm gonna watch, like, because depending on the three people you name, like that's the likelihood that I'm gonna sit down and watch it. Because also I like to follow actors' careers. So sometimes like somebody will tell me they're watching a movie and I'll be like, oh yeah, the person that's playing this character, they were in this movie in like 2006. And this person is in there like, why am I supposed to care?
I do that a lot with like different musical artists too. Like I will just completely like spew information about super obscure topics and people will just be sitting there, and I do applaud them for just sitting there and listen to me talk about the genetic structure of an aloe plant. But I do appreciate it. I do it a lot and it's interesting.
I'll talk about random stuff sometimes, or it's like, usually the stuff I talk about is maybe like stuff from my classes, but it's just like, I've always struggled with keeping track of people in film and celebrities and stuff. I don't want to equate celebrities to actors and actresses, but there's a little bit of like mix there. Whatever.
There's overlap for sure.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't know why. I just am so bad at caring about actors and actresses and keeping track of it.
I feel like it's just like what were you gonna say?
I was just saying, like, the most, I guess, for me is like, I'll recognize someone's voice in a movie and be like, wait a minute, I know that person from something else.
Yeah.
But, like, I don't know the actor or actress's names half the time.
For me, it's because I check IMDb's like a lot. I check IMDb's quite a bit, and I'll just go through their IMDb, and then I'll kind of notice like, okay, they did this, they did that, and then I'll just recognize their face to their name because I looked at their IMDb a lot, and then I'll be like, oh, like it's bad with theater actors because like sometimes I'll see them on their TV gig, and I'll be like, oh, that's like my mom was watching something with Bettina Miller in it, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's Bettina Miller, and my mom just looks over like, and I'm like, she was the original Dolores Van Cartier in Sister Act on Broadway. And my mom was just like, wow, that's so cool. Anyways, you're interrupting my show, Hunter.
I mean, it's cool that you're able to keep track of people like that. I could never.
Just because we were talking about the queer representation to Electric Boogaloo, I wanted to mention that both Jordan and River, who are not in this podcast today, we're in that episode, and I wanted to point out that, first of all, they did an amazing job in that. It was really important because a lot of times in conversations regarding like trans representation, non-binary representation often kind of goes under the radar because obviously trans feminine representation is something we have a lot more examples of. But Jordan added a really good perspective on that and gave really good examples. And River also was very helpful with the trans masculine portion with me, because they gave a lot of insights and talked about stuff that also hadn't occurred to me, and they have their own different perspective on certain things. So, and they have a perspective on trans feminine film issues. So it was just really nice to kind of all talk as a group. And both Jordan and River, Jordan, obviously, we've talked about, was one of the OGs, was probably the person who got the gang all together and really started this podcast.
Yeah, they were. They definitely were. They were the one who had the idea. They were the first one to pitch it to the leader of Outreach, Laura, and to my friend Ryan, who's helped us keep things organized. I got you, Ryan.
So
and
I
also,
just wanted
like,
to.
Yeah.
No,
sorry,
you can speak.
I mean, we're dropping names. I also want to mention Terrell, who does our audio. Like, got in contact with Ryan to get in contact with the audio person, Terrell, and like, you know, really helped organize not just the people, but also the organization of the podcast. So like, yeah, shout out to Jordan and everyone else. I don't know.
Damn. And then River came in after, but so far has had nothing but spicy hot takes in every episode that they're in. It's been nice because I know that kind of like what we've all talked about, they were anxious coming into it, but it's nice to see them get more confident and more like really having fun with the podcast and getting passionate about certain topics. So it's just been really nice working with them throughout this year and getting to know them just as a person.
Yeah. Just major thank yous to everybody. Honestly, especially Terrell for having to listen to all of us go off on our bullshit. Major thanks to him. Laura Jenny for funding all of this, getting all the stuff up together. Ryan for keeping us all on track somehow. You guys for just being awesome, doing the research, listening to everybody. Of course, Jordan for just being the most amazing, hardworking person, I've ever met. And just, everybody. It's just been great so far, and I cannot wait to see where this year goes.
Yeah. Okay. This is like sort of off topic from what we've been doing just now, but like talking about queer representation, but not the second episode, the first one, which was, it just happened to be the first episode. I thought about talking about this before we started recording, and then I forgot about it, but I'm bringing it up again. So the question about like mistakes that like only you knew about but no one else knew about, well, joke's on you. I made a mistake in the first episode that even I didn't know about, and that was like, maybe this is stupid, but I want to talk about it. Whatever. Like, I talked about a cartoon that I like, or liked, I guess, called She-Ra and the Princess of Power for its queer representation, because I thought it was pretty good at the time. And some of it is good, I'm not going to lie. There's this wonderful lesbian relationship between two characters named Spinnerella and Natasha that's gorgeous and perfect and so wonderful. But, like, kudos to them, because they managed to end their cartoon with a canonical lesbian relationship with the main character in it. That's really cool. That's really great progress. But also, like, I praised that relationship a lot, but I don't like it. Because looking at the way that they built it up throughout the series, I know there's disagreements about this, but I think it's hella abusive, and not a good relationship to teach kids is okay. That was a mistake on me, or at least I consider it a mistake. And I want to talk about it. So there you go.
You know what? But that's part of growing and changing. Like when you learn more things about things, like, God, y'all don't want to know what middle school me thought about what was healthy in a relationship. We don't want to go there.
Y'all do not want to know what middle school me thought was funny on YouTube.
I can't really,
yeah.
Really, that's really not good. That's really not a good relationship.
I was a Homestuck fan in middle school, so that was a big low for me.
You look like a Homestuck fan.
Don't say that! That's the worst. You're mean.
I'm just
no bullying on the podcast. But yeah, I think that just we grow, we change, we get new opinions on things. We're gonna mess up, but the point is that we're learning, and we are, as we learn, we're exposed to more context about the world around us and like what being a person is like. So, and I'm grateful for that.
Mm-hmm. You can't learn without making mistakes. So just don't be afraid to fuck up. It's okay. And if anyone makes you think that it's not okay, who gives a shit? Fuck them.
Very fair.
But at the same time, like, don't be afraid to be an open listener and be open to other opinions. But also just know when to say, actually, I've listened to you. That's stupid. I don't care. You know. Big balance.
I recognize that the council has made a decision, but given that it's a stupid decision, I have elected to ignore it. Yeah, I've seen a Marvel movie.
Singular Marvel movie. You
You
look like you watch David Lynch movies for the plot.
That would require me watching a David Lynch movie. I watched Eraserhead on a treadmill, and that's not like, so I was physically in pain while I was mentally in pain, and I was just lost. I remember telling my friends as I was watching it, this is the worst thing I've ever seen, and like continuing till the end, and it didn't get better.
I have no idea what the fuck that movie even is. I don't know anything.
That's A-okay, buddy. We gotta give Stephen and Melanie the attention they definitely deserve. They have helped so much by keeping us all on track, just listening and somehow managing to not go insane by our queer drawl.
Melanie, I really appreciate the help that you've given in this podcast, but also thank you for being here so that I can just say, hi, Melanie, like every day, every time. It's great. I love it. I appreciate you being here. It's very nice.
Mm-hmm. Stephen, too.
It's also nice hearing your bar stories. Now that I've been like going out to the bar, like as a woman, I love hearing women's bar stories.
And just you and Steven have been great emotional supports and like keeping us going, keeping us validating our feelings on stuff, showing up for all of the meetings just to be there and like giving us thumbs up and during check-ins and talking about feelings and emotional stuff, giving advice throughout the years. We really appreciate you guys.
Oh my gosh, y'all have just given me so much advice throughout my various experiences in this past year. It has been like, you guys have just been like absolutely amazing.
I feel like since meeting Steven, like I've been able to like tap into this queer community that I didn't even know existed in Muncie. And like, I don't know, it's strange because like the whole mentorship thing started because I was cussing him out about a post he made. So it's like, it's interesting that I'm here now and like now I'm on a podcast and I have a ton of like queer friends and I have a queer community now. And it all started from me being upset about it.
And you know,
it's weird
that's on growth.
Yeah.
It's really nice that we have gotten to grow closer as friends, and I've met some new people over the course of the podcast and grown closer to some people I already knew. And I think that's probably the theme of this review and of this reflection, is just growth and how far we've come, who we are now, who we were then, and the family and found friends we've met along the way.
That's kind of gay.
It's a lot of gay, but what are you going to do about it?
Love that.
What is this, a My Little Pony episode?
Howard.
One thing that I really love. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you go. I was just being obnoxious.
I can be very loud and passionate, I guess is the word I'd use. I go on rants a lot, and I make a lot of stupid jokes and shit, and it's like, I've just met a lot of people who just couldn't give a shit. But like, this is a group of people who like to listen to me just be stupid. And that's really all that you need, is people who love you even when you're stupid. But you know what? Actually, no, that's mean. That's like me devaluing myself. That I gotta work on shit, man. Mm-hmm. Anyway, but like,
yeah,
I love going off. And
appreciate
I love
yourself.
hearing people like appreciate me going off. I love going
You're so
on
sorry. So smart. So smart.
Thank you.
Your passion is infectious. So this has been the OUTcast Podcast Year in Review. We hope that you like listening to it and hearing our stories from behind the scenes. Before we go, we would like to take this time to thank our loyal listeners for sticking through us during the first year of podcasting. It means so much to all of us. If you want to listen to any of the episodes we discussed here, we're available on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music /Audible, Deezer, and Apple Podcasts. If you want to interact with us on social media, just look up our name on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you need someone to talk to, look up the Trevor Project or Muncie Outreach. The suicide hotline is 800-273-8255. We all here care about you, so please take care of yourself. Happy New Year to everyone, and we'll see you in the next episode.